예, 반갑습니다. 지금 세 번째 반복 하고 있는데요. 예, 거의 다 돼서 다시 동영상 한번 찍어보고 있습니다. 첫 번째는 한 5개씩, 예, 하루에 5개씩 218개잖아요. 5개씩이니까 한 2일, 예, 계산하면 42일 정도 나오는데 실제로는 한 2달? 예, 중간에 뭐 휴일도 있고, 예, 토요일 일요일은 복습을 하고 그 주에 했던 거 대략 한 2달 정도, 예, 2달 정도 했던 것 같고, 그때는 이제 아예 안 들렸기 때문에, 예, 그냥 계속 한 문장씩 계속, 예, 연습했었습니다. 예, 한 문장 예, 한 문장 안 되면 반씩 끊어서 반 하고 나머지 하고 합쳐서 하고, 예, 그렇게 해서 한 문장씩 했었고, 예, 두 번째는 한 열흘? 예, 열흘 정도 걸리더라고요. 하루에 30개씩. 예, 하루에 30개씩 하고, 그때는, 여기 영어 자막? 예, 영어 자막만 했거든요. 영어 자막만. 예, 그때는 한 문장씩, 짧은 건 2문장씩, 그렇게 했었고, 지금은 세 번째 반복인데, 예, 이상하게 시간이 좀 더 걸리더라고요. 지금은 한 2주? 예, 2주 정도 돼서 지금 214번 지금 하고 있거든요. 이번에는 뭐 이런 거 2문장 정도? 예, 이어서 2문장 정도 하게 되고, 긴 문장은, 예, 한 문장씩도 하고, 뭐 짧은 건 다 할 수도 있고, 뭐 그 정도? 예, 그냥 일단 뭐 얼마나 능력이 향상됐는지는 잘 모르겠는데, 그냥, 예, 계속 하고 있습니다. 지금 6월부터 시작했으니까 6, 7, 8, 9, 4달? 네, 4달 된 것 같은데, 예, 어쨌든 뭐 6개월 후에는, 네, 미드도 좀 볼 수 있고, 만화 영화도 영어 자막으로 볼 수 있고, 듣고 뭐 이렇게 하려고 계획했었는데, 현재는, 네, 4달 정도 됐고, 지금 이 라푼젤은 세 번째 반복 거의 다 됐고, 지금 한 10번 정도 반복 하려고 생각하고 있거든요. 근데 중간중간에 뭐 쓰면서 받아쓰기 하면서 해볼 생각도 있고, 아니면 이제 자막 없이 이제 여기, 예, 무자막으로만도 한번 반복하고 싶은 생각이 있습니다. 일단은, 예, 214번, 예, 일단 3번 반복, 예, 마치고 또 다시 또 4번 반복 제가 어떻게 했는지 또 해서 올려드리겠습니다. 이야, 예, 그러면 공부를 시작해야 되겠습니다. 예, 다들 화이팅 하십시오. 이야, 예.
Told me otherwise. Dreams came true all over the place. That guy.
Dreams come true all over the place. Dreams come true. Dreams come true all over the place. 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 Dreams come true all over the place.
That guy went on to become the most famous in the place. That guy went on.
That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on the most. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to be. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert.
That guy went on to become the most famous.
That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. That guy went on to become the most famous concert because that guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. You can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert because the world. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert.
That guy went on to become the most famous.
That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert because in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to most. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. Pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it.
That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world.
That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to play. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to play. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. If you can believe it. That guy went on to That guy went on to become the most famous concert pianist in the world. You can believe it. And this guy, where he eventually found his love. And this guy, where he eventually found his love. And this guy, where he eventually found his true love. And this guy, where he eventually found his true love. And this guy, where he eventually found true love. And this guy, where he eventually found true love. And this guy, will eventually find true love. And this guy 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 will eventually find true love.
As for this guy,
As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy.
As for this guy,
well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy.
he's never told me otherwise. He's happy. He's never told
me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise.
He's never told me otherwise.
He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise. He's never told me otherwise.
As for this guy,
As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. Well, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise. As for this guy, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. Well, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise.
as for this guy,
As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise.
as for this guy,
As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, as for this guy, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. Well, as for this guy, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, as for this guy, as for this guy, as for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. I never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. As for this guy, well, I assume he's happy. He's never told me otherwise.
thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Appeared almost over. Kingdom disappeared. Crime in the kingdom to Maximus. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappears all over the. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, thanks to Maximus,
crime in the kingdom disappears almost.
Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the king. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared. Thanks to Maximus.
Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared all over. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight.
Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight.
Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight. Thanks to Maximus, crime in the kingdom disappeared almost overnight.
As did most of the apples. Most of the apples. The apples. Most of the apples. As did most of the apples. As did most of the apples.
As did most of the apples.
As did most of.
As did most of the apples. As did most of the apples. As did most of the apples. Most of the
Pascal.
apples.
As did most of the apples.
As did most of the apples. As did most of the apples.
As did most.
As did most of the apples. 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 Pascal never changed.
As did most.
As did most of the apples. 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 Pascal never changed.
Pascal.
Pascal never changed. Pascal never changed. Pascal never changed. Pascal never changed. Pascal never change. Pascal, never change. Pascal, never changed. 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 Pascal, never changed.
At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally At last,
Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home. At last, Rapunzel was home. She finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family.
At last,
Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family.
at last,
Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family. At last, Rapunzel was home, and she finally had a real family.
she was a princess worth waiting for. She was
She was worth waiting for. She was princess worth waiting for. She was worth waiting. She was princess worth waiting for. She was princess worth waiting for. She was the princess worth waiting for.
Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all the. She was a princess.
She was princess worth waiting for. She was the princess worth waiting for. She was 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 the princess worth waiting for. She was 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 princess worth waiting for.
Beloved by all, loved by all,
Beloved by all, she loved her kingdom. Beloved by all, she loved the kingdom.
with all the grace and
Beloved by all, she led the kingdom. Beloved by all, she led her 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 kingdom. Beloved by all, she led the kingdom. Beloved by all, she led her 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 kingdom.
with all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before. Kingdom with all the grace and kingdom with all the grace and all the grace and all the
With all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her.
all the grace,
All the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her.
grace, all the grace,
All-
all the grace,
with all the grace, wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace,
and wisdom,
with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her, with all the grace and wisdom that our parents did before her.
all she led her, beloved by all,
Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by all, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with the grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her. Beloved by her, she led her kingdom with all grace and wisdom that her parents did before her.
Asking. As for me, well, and as
for me, well, I started going by Eugene. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me,
well, I started going by Eugene again.
and as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again.
And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene.
And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again.
Stop thieving and basically turned it all around. But I know him. Stop thieving and stop thieving.
Stop thieving and basically turn it all around. Stop thieving and basically turn it all around. And thieving and basically turn it all around. Stop 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 thieving and basically turn it all around.
But I know I started going
And as for me, I started going by Eugene again. Stop thieving and basically turn it all around. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. Stop thieving and basically turn it all around.
But I know what the big.
And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. Stop thieving and basically turn it all around. And as for me, well, I started going by Eugene again. Stop thieving and basically turn it all around. And as for me, well, started by Eugene again. Stop thieving and basically.
But I know what the big question. But I know what the big question.
But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is.
But I know what the big question.
But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and ever get married?
But I know what.
But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is.
But I know what the big question.
But I know what the big question is. 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 But I know what the big question is.
But I know what the big question. But I know what the big question. But I know what the big. But I know what the big.
But I know what the big question is. 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 But I know what the big question is.
But I know what the big question.
But I know what the big question is. 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 Did Rapunzel and ever get married? But I know what the big question. But I know what the big question is.
Did Rapunzel and I? Did Rapunzel?
Did Rapunzel and ever get married? Did Rapunzel and ever get married? Did Rapunzel and I 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 ever get married?
Know what the big question around, but I know what the big question. I know what the big question.
But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. But I know. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married? But I know what the big question is. But I know what the big question is. Did Rapunzel and I ever get married?
Well, I'm pleased to tell you that after years. Well, I'm pleased to tell you. Well, I'm pleased to tell.
Well, I'm pleased to tell you. 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 Well, I'm pleased to tell you.
that after
years and years and asking and asking and asking.
Well, I'm pleased to.
Well, I'm pleased to tell you. Well, I'm pleased to tell you.
That after
years.
Well,
Well, I'm pleased to tell you. 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 That after years and years and asking and asking and asking. But I'm pleased to tell. Where I'm pleased to tell you. 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 Where I'm pleased to tell you.
And after years,
There are years and years of asking and asking and asking.
and after years,
There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking. There are years and years. There are years and years of asking. There are years and years of asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking. There are years and years of asking, asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking, asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking. There are years. There are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years and years of asking, asking and asking.
Rapunzel and I ever did Rapunzel to tell you? And I'm pleased to tell you. Well,
But I'm pleased to tell you, there are years and years asking and asking and asking.
Well, I'm
There
pleased to tell you.
But I'm pleased to tell you, after all years and years of asking and asking and asking. But I'm pleased to tell you, but I'm pleased to tell you, but I'm pleased to tell you, there are years and years of asking and asking and asking. There are years. But I'm pleased to tell you, 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 there are years and years of asking and asking and asking.
I finally said yes. I
finally say yes. I finally say yes. I finally say yes. I finally say yes. I finally say yes. I finally say yes. Eugene, not I asked her.
I finally said.
I finally say yes. 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 Eugene. Alright. I asked her. 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 Alright. Alright. I asked her. Alright. I asked her. Alright. I asked her.
And we're living happily. And we're living.
We're living happily ever after. We're living happily ever after.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. We're living happily ever after. 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 Yes, we are. We're living happily ever after. We're living happily ever after. Yes, we are. We're living happily ever after. 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 Yes, we are. We're living happily ever after. 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 Yes, we are. I finally say yes. Eugene. Alright. I asked her. We're living happily ever after. Yes, we are. 예, 라푼젤 세 번째 반복 완료입니다. 예. 4번 반복 완료일 때 또 뵙겠습니다. 이야.